VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the Internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
Well, thank you, Gordon Morris, and welcome to Crosstalk. It is always a privilege to have you join us today, folks, and today is no exception. We are going to be talking with a gentleman who is a pastor, a columnist, and a talk show host. His name is Chuck Baldwin. And Chuck is the founder and pastor of Crossroad Baptist Church in Pensacola, Florida. He's a nationally known columnist carried by WorldNet Daily, Covenant News, News with Views, and many other areas as well. He's also a talk show host heard around the country. And we'd like to say welcome, Chuck. It's nice to have you with us online.
Thank you, Vic. It's great to be with you again.
Chuck, as we are looking at what's been happening with all of the things, yesterday was, of course, the 6th anniversary of 9/11. And I know that you put out a piece called 6 Years Later. Share with us your thoughts. Do you think the Americans have, or that America as a country has learned anything 6 years ago?
I would like to say that we have, but unfortunately, Vic, I must be honest, I don't think we've learned a whole lot. Here we are 6 years after the terrorist attack on 9/11, and our borders and our ports are still wide open. Just recently, one of our security administrators told the media that we were aware of potential terrorist cells within the United States. I think this administration has done a miserable job of protecting America from future terrorist activity by not being willing to close the border and to stem the tide of illegal immigration and even, dare I say, some and certain legal immigration. So I think in those terms, I don't think we've learned a whole lot. Spiritually, I don't think we've learned a whole lot. I think right after 9/11, there was a movement among God's people to turn to the Lord. I sensed a revival spirit for just a few weeks. But then that waned and it became business as usual. I don't see a great turning to God on behalf of the church today. So I think spiritually, I think politically and culturally, we are no better off today, 6 years later, than we were at this time in 2001.
You know, I've heard yesterday, heard a young minister who was decrying any concerns over political structures or moral structures, that we should just be concerned with praising God and moving along. And that we are not of this world, we are simply those who are bound for heaven, and that really should not concern ourselves with these issues. What would you say to a young man like that, who's a pastor, actually?
Unfortunately, I hear that sentiment repeatedly. I think it comes from great ignorance and great lethargy at the same time. You know, we in the United States have enjoyed the blessings of liberty for these many years because of the sacrifice that was made by our forebears. They were the ones that paid the heavy price. They were the ones that gave everything so that their posterity, you and me, could live in a land of liberty. And we have taken that for granted to the point that we have forgotten what it took to purchase the freedoms that we enjoy in this country.
Yes.
And it's very easy to sit back and spout these spiritual platitudes about how that the only thing we're supposed to do is preach the gospel or praise the Lord or do quote-unquote spiritual work and leave everything else to unbelievers and to wicked men, when we haven't really tasted the results of that philosophy up close and personal. But you ask the Christians around the world, ask the Christians in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, in North Korea, in China, ask Christians who are under the heavy hand and the heavy foot of tyranny and oppression if they would not love to be able to live in a land of liberty and freedom like we have enjoyed all these years. Now, I think it's a sinful, wicked philosophy that we would sit back and allow this country to revert back into oppression after the sacrifices that were made by our forebears for freedom and liberty.
You know, with that mindset, what's the sense of even sending missionaries to foreign countries and pagan countries? Because, after all, their way of life must be okay the way it is, as they're cannibals or living in corrupt, morally corrupt situation. The Christian life, obviously, the fruit of our Christian life ought to bear fruit that you can see as well.
Well, your reasoning is exactly right, and the people that would say this, they're not thinking it through. That's why I say it's a lethargy and an ignorance. If someone is breaking into their home in the middle of the night with the intention of raping a man's wife and daughters and potentially killing his family, plundering his home, is he just going to sit back in his bedroom comfortably and say, well, we're just supposed to praise the Lord, and there's nothing that we can really do? It's not really our domain to be involved in trying to stop this evil that's going on? Or is he going to get up and fight for his family? And, we're talking about fighting for our families. We're talking about fighting for our freedoms and our liberties and everything that we hold dear, whether it's in the political realm or the social realm, the cultural realm. No matter where we find it, we have a responsibility to stand and fight for those things that are right. And because we're Christians, we do not give up and surrender our citizenship as Americans. The Apostle Paul, if you read the book of Acts, you find that he referred to and not only referred to, but he actually utilized the benefits of his Roman citizenship often as he dealt with the political establishment of his day. Well, we have great benefits and liberties as American citizens, and should we not use those for the cause of Christ and the cause of freedom in our country? Of course we should.
What are your number one concerns right now that you think our nation's leadership needs to address?
I think probably the number one issue politically and for security and safety considerations is what I started with here on your show this afternoon, Vic, and that is this illegal immigration problem. I think that is the number one issue confronting America's future safety. And I do believe that our federal government has been derelict in fulfilling this responsibility. There's no question in my own mind, personally, that we have been infiltrated already by terrorists because of these vast open borders and the unwillingness of the federal government to stem the tide. I think they are waiting for the opportunity to strike. I think that when that opportunity avails itself and they feel they're ready, we can anticipate another terrorist attack. And when it comes, hopefully I'm wrong, but if it comes, and when it comes, I think we would have to say, well, how did we allow this to happen? After 6 years, remember that the terrorists of 9/11 were here legally. They used the legal process to gain access to our country. So not only have we not done anything to thwart legal immigration, potentially those that would come from terrorist states, but we have done nothing to stop illegal immigration, which portends great problems for America. So I really believe that from a safety and security perspective, we must address the subject of illegal immigration, and that hasn't been addressed to this point.
You know, as I read the story of David and his shepherding, if you recall, he was a young man, of course, who played the harp and played beautiful music when Saul was distressed. But he, being a shepherd, was not some kind of a passive pansy type of individual who was incapable of responding to enemy. His own mention of the fact that he fought a bear and a lion, killed them both, meant that he was there, he had been trained to protect his sheep. And walls of protection are not strange to the sheepfold. There were some shepherds who used to find a cave or even an encampment of rock, I should say, a structure of rock, and would lay across the gate the doorway, and in essence would say to any predator, over my dead body will you affect my sheep?
Mm-hmm.
And the issue here, of course, as Christians, with the rights and privileges, so many of the folk who are apathetic today seem to forget that the liberty that they are enjoying right now was purchased by the blood of patriots who fought for the right to worship as we please.
Absolutely. And that is what most disturbs me, as I have tried to call out for the Black Regiment and try to appeal to the sense of patriotism, the love of freedom, and so forth among America's pastors. I've sensed this lethargy, this spirit of that it really doesn't matter what I do, that that's not really my calling. And if our founding fathers had had that spirit, if the preachers of the generations that lived before and right after that revolutionary period, we would not be here as a country today. Mm-hmm. The freedoms that we've enjoyed, the nation itself would not exist as we know it today if they had not been willing to pay that price. Well, if that's true, then what will our children and our grandchildren experience? What kind of freedoms will they enjoy? What kind of nation will they live in if we in this generation aren't willing to do what needs to be done to procure and secure those freedoms and liberties for future generations?
And you know, the message of what God has done, even in conflict, is important to be passed on to those that are younger. If you recall Joshua when he crossed the Jordan River, and they took 12 stones out of the middle of the river and put them on the shore, and it was for the purpose of a memorial to saying this is what God did here, so that when the children came along and said, what meaneth these stones, that it would be a testimony to what God had done. Continuum.
Absolutely. And I think we've lost that, Vic. Somehow, somewhere along the line, I don't know whether it's this so-called separation of church and state idea that has sunk deeply down into the psyche of pastors and Christians. I'm not sure if it's just the preoccupation with prosperity and success and that kind of mentality. I'm not sure exactly what the motivation is, but somewhere along the line, we have lost that spirit of resolve, that spirit of resistance. Flee the devil, and resist him, and he will flee from you.
That's right.
Well, we're not resisting much of anything anymore.
That's right.
The devil is manifesting himself in a variety of ways across our country, and without Christians rising up as the salt of the earth to resist him, he will have free reign among us. And I fear that's what's happening. And it's very easy for us to justify why we're not doing it, but I really think that whenever we look into history and we look into the face of God and we look into the eyes of our children and grandchildren, there's no excuse.
Resisting is not a passive response. Resisting is an active response. And ladies and gentlemen, God calls us to resist the devil and he will flee from us. We're going to be taking a break for a moment and back in just a moment with Chuck Baldwin. He's a pastor, a columnist, and also a talk show host. He's in Pensacola, Florida. We'll be right back. This is Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, Noah's Ark researcher at the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, when Noah took the animals on board the ark, did he also have to take sea creatures like whales as well?
No, he did not, Chris. The Bible very explicitly says that Noah was to take 2 of every kind of land-dwelling, air-breathing animal. He did not have to take those animals which could survive outside in the ocean. That's the point. The whole purpose of the ark was for survival of those animal types that could not survive outside. In fact, that's the message of the ark in general. It was for salvation of the humans as well. Those who believed God and entrusted their souls to Him, they survived the judgment of sin into the new and better world afterwards. The story of Noah's ark is a story of salvation, but it's also a story of judgment. We read it clearly back in Genesis.
Thanks, Dr. Morris. For more on creation, visit our website at www.icr.org.
And welcome back to Crosstalk as we continue with our visit today with Chuck Baldwin, a pastor, columnist, and talk show host out of Pensacola, Florida today. And Chuck, I wanted to ask you this question. You know, it was reported this week that Mexican rigs are rolling across America now due to NAFTA and the Bush administration's push to open our borders. What's your response on this?
This is horrific. I'm glad to see that the United States Senate has passed bilateral legislation to stop the implementation of this. Mm-hmm. I believe the bill actually defunds this portion of the provision. So I'm not sure exactly what that's going to mean in a practical sense. Does that mean the trucks that are already on the road, or I mean, how does that work? You know, the trucks are already coming across the border as of last Saturday, my understanding. So I'm not sure exactly what that Senate bill is going to do, but I'm thankful they did it. It sent a clear message that the members of both parties are willing to stand up for our safety and our sovereignty. This, to me, is an atrocious, abysmal action on behalf of this president to bring across our borders trucks and truckers from Mexico, which portends calamity on our roads. I mean, these trucks do not have the same safety standards as our trucks. The truckers do not abide by the same rules and regulations as American truckers must abide by. Can you imagine? With the track record of immigration and drug smuggling that already exists across the southern border, can you imagine how this is going to expand the potential for human smuggling, for drug smuggling? Can you think of many of these trucks are leaving from the southern part of Mexico down to Mexico City. They're driving like crazy to get to the border. They're coming across the border now on this accelerated entranceway now into the United States. There's no rules and regulations regarding how long they can drive, how many hours behind the wheel versus how many hours away from the wheel, like the American truckers have to do. We just can't really even envision the potential risk, the danger on America's highways with these trucks, and all of the other problems that correspond. So I think this is absolutely one of the most nonsensical decisions that a president could ever make. And words almost escape me to describe how terrible this is for our country.
You know, Chuck, I was up in northern Minnesota recently, just within 65 miles of the Canadian border, let's say 85 miles. And there, the big dual-lane highways are being constructed. That's where I was raised. That's my home country up there. And great big rock plateaus are being blasted, and the roads are being widened. Huge freeways are being put in. Up here in the north, near the Canadian wilderness, on the way up to International Falls and Fort Francis. And obviously, Highway I-35 actually will become, well, in fact, they say it won't be I-35. It'll be another highway, and the funding from I-35 is going to be withheld for a period of 10 years to help finance this new superhighway.
The NAFTA superhighway,
yeah.
Exactly, all the way from Mexico to Canada, and then branching laterally across the states. And then when you mentioned Minnesota, I thought of the bridge collapse there in Minneapolis. You know, there is a serious investigation taking place now as to the possibility that part of the contribution to that collapse may have been the excessive amount of trucking traffic over that bridge. And how many other bridges are there across America that are already laboring under the heavy loads, but now then the loads are only increasing, and then to add insult to injury, President Bush brings across these Mexican trucks, which are going to further increase the risk of the infrastructure of America's roadways and bridges. In any way that we look at this, this is a terrible, terrible decision.
You know, nothing seems to have been done on the issue of the illegals swarming the U.S. I guess my question, can any president do anything to stop this lawbreaking?
Oh, Absolutely, Vic. You know they can. President Eisenhower did it. If any president that wants to stop the illegal immigration into America could do it. The idea that we can't secure our border is crazy. I mean, think about this. We're sending Border Patrol agents from America to Iraq to secure Iraq's border. But we won't even secure our own border. Saudi Arabia has built a wall around their country to separate, to keep out the massive amounts of refugees and potential immigration flood that would come because of the war there in their country. Any country, if they have the resolve to do it, can secure their border. We have the ability, we have the technology, we have the manpower, the capability that we can close that border and keep that illegal alien traffic from taking place. It's just a matter of will.
Looking at the next election, a lot of conservative Christians are wondering what to do. Do any of the candidates stand out to you as men of decency and conscience on the important issues?
Well, there is one that stands out to me, and unfortunately, I don't see my fellow brothers and sisters, including my preacher friends, reaching out to his campaign, and I find that very troubling. And I think I understand some of the reason behind it, but on the other hand, I think they're missing the real need of America at this time. And in my view, the only candidate in the Republican Party that's currently running for president that we could support with any kind of confidence that he would make a difference is Ron Paul of Texas. And I think he's the whole package. I think he's the real deal. He would support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, which every constitutional officer is sworn to do. He has a proven track record. He's committed to the same principles and the values that we believe in. He's the whole package. He's everything that I think that we could want of a president. And unfortunately, many of the Christians and evangelicals are not looking his way because he was a libertarian candidate years ago. Maybe that's part of the reason. Maybe part of it is because they just really don't know that much about him as a member of Congress. Maybe he's kind of blended in with the crowd and it hasn't stood out, I'm not sure. But I really think that he's the kind of man that we need. He would stand against this NAFTA superhighway and this North American Union. He would secure our borders. He has the right perspective of international affairs. I know some think that they don't agree with him on Iraq, but I personally agree with him on Iraq. America is not historically a nation, and this is the conservative position historically, that we are not the world's policeman. We're not supposed to use our troops for nation building. I remember whenever George Bush first ran for president back in 1999 for the 2000 campaign, he campaigned as a Taft conservative. He campaigned as a Washington conservative. By that I mean George Washington conservative. Mm-hmm. That, in other words, America is not an arm of the United Nations. We don't use our troops for nation building. We're not the world's policeman. He campaigned on that theme, and then, of course, after he became president, he went another direction immediately. But this is the historic position of conservatism. Christians are peace-loving people. We're not a warmongering people. We don't believe in preemptive war. We don't believe in attacking nations without cause and without due process of law under our Constitution, historically. And so I think that Ron Paul, who believes in the constitutional restraints and restrictions upon the office of president, who understands the constitutional safeguards between the executive branch and the legislative branch, he's right on the moral issues. I think he's the man that Christians should be supporting.
We're going to give everybody a chance to share your views in a few moments when we open the phone lines. Here is a question. As we see Tony Campolo and Jim Wallace, who are traveling around the country, trying to get Christians off the moral issues like abortion and gay marriage and get them passionate about global warming and saving the whales. We see Rick Warren, his peace plan is taking the place of his purpose plan, and much of that has, again, the benevolence and saving the world mentality. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Well, I have, obviously I've been very critical of the Rick Warren style of ministry for some time. I think the churches in America have largely been deceived. I believe that we've gotten caught up in this success-oriented ministry idea that somehow or another we're supposed to have the biggest church. We're supposed to have, the biggest congregation, budgets, income. We become success-oriented, prosperity-oriented, as if that is the gauge of our ministry. You compare that to the Word of God and look at the preachers of old, even not so far away in our own history, and see that the preachers were men who endured great affliction, and they were in reproach by their societies and by their cities. They were not loved. They were not deemed successful. They were not trying to be popular. They preached the Word of God faithfully. They preached the hard sermons. They taught discipleship, commitment, dedication, resolve. They preached against sin. They weren't afraid to offend. They weren't afraid to be controversial. They stood out from the crowd, and they found favor with God, even though they did not find favor with men. Well, that's our tradition. But we somehow or another, we've lost that. We've become people pleasers. We've become ear ticklers. We don't want to offend anybody. The Joel Osteen concept has swept America, and the preachers, I think, have been caught up in it, Vic. And I really think it's part of the reason why we're not being the salt of the earth as we should. It's because we're more concerned about pleasing people and not offending anyone. And as a result, the message has lost the convicting power of the Holy Spirit, and our people don't fear God, and our people don't understand God, and there is no real life to our message. We might have a lot of people, we might have big budgets and big buildings, but that, in the end of the day, that's not the judge of our success, I don't think.
And those who are playing the flute of the Pied Piper that are leading many of the churches there, like Tony Campolo and Jim Wallace. Tony Campolo's wife, promoter of same-sex marriage. You have Jim Wallace, of course, with doctrinal issues that are extremely alarming. Folks, we're going to be taking a break here in about 15 seconds, and we're going to come back again. We're going to invite you to come online with us. I'm opening our phone lines here on Crosstalk, 800-733-9829. Our guest today is Chuck Baldwin. He's a columnist. He is a pastor. He's a talk show host, and we'd love to have you join us in conversation. Our phone number again, 800-733-9829. We'll be right back.
Many churches today are choosing to follow the fads of our times and have literally gone to market. However, some churches are trying to stay home, that is, to remain firmly grounded in the Scriptures. Still, the pressures mount, the temptations are repackaged, and the schemes of the world become more and more pervasive. In the book, This Little Church Stayed Home, Dr. Gary Gilley explores the many pressures on conservative churches to sell out to modern trends and innovations. The book examines postmodernism, the purpose-driven life, the emergent church, and other trends. It's a call for the church to stay true to the historic doctrines of the Christian faith. To obtain your copy of This Little Church Stayed Home, send a donation of $16 or more to VCY America, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. To donate by phone, call 1-800-729-9829. 1-800-729-9829.
And welcome back to Crosstalk as we continue our conversation today with Chuck Baldwin. Dr. Baldwin is the pastor of the Crossroads Baptist Church in Pensacola, Florida. He's also involved as a writer, involved with talk radio, and stands firm on God's Word. As we were talking about the issue of Tony Campolo and those of his mindset, striving heavily into this saving the whales, global warming, and all of this type of thing. And you're finding even the National Association of Evangelicals is drifting in this direction, making this and AIDS and all of the other things the most important thing. It's very, very interesting to see what's happening. Now, I remember talking to the folks at WorldNet Daily, Chuck, and when he was over in Syria, when I'm talking about Rick Warren now, when he was over in Syria, he caused quite a stir when he chose to say some things to the Syrian government that literally, in many people's views, were traitorous. And it was, treason when you think of what he was saying. And then I understand when he was advised by the founder and editor of WorldNet Daily that he shouldn't go to Syria, he snapped back. Well, he knew more about the Middle East than he did. And, of course, the editor of WorldNet Daily is Lebanese.
Yes.
And so he said he knew more, and then he let something slip that you just shared with me on the air.
That he has just recently become a member of the Council on Foreign Relations.
That's right.
Yeah, I hope that all of our audience understands the CFR. The Council on Foreign Relations has been for many years the most, in my view, I would use the word sinister organization in terms of undermining our national sovereignty and independence. It is a think tank made up of elitists from virtually every quadrant of our society, and the goal seems to be a regional or multinational government. They are the ones that are pushing this North American Union, this NAFTA superhighway, the Amero, and all of these features. It is the Council on Foreign Relations that has pushed for America's intricate involvement in the United Nations, getting us embedded with foreign governments and foreign affairs, things that are absolutely none of our business, that have caused nothing but grief and sorrow everywhere we go. This organization has a very dubious record for many, many years. And interestingly, Newt Gingrich, a possible candidate for president, is a member of the CFR, and Fred Thompson, former senator from Tennessee, is also a member of the CFR.
And recently, Rick Warren. And
also Dr. Land from the Southern Baptist Convention is also now a member of the Council on Foreign Relations.
We're going to go to Trevor in Kansas City, Missouri. Trevor, welcome to the program. You're on the air.
Hi.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead. Turn your radio down, okay?
Hi. It's off.
Okay.
I just wanted to voice my concern about the marriage of big business and politics, and of course how the FDA obviously makes their own rules, and how they actually make drugs. They're developing a drug now to prevent people that illegally take prescription medications. They're actually developing a drug to keep people from taking medications illegally, and that just seems, from the core, completely impossible. And
let me ask you a question. As far as this takeover and making it the American Union rather than keeping national sovereignty, how do you take on this?
You speaking to me?
And well, I was asking Trevor there.
Okay.
I'm sorry now?
Okay. Trevor, I think we have a hearing problem here between us there, but I really appreciate your comments there. Our connection is very poor. We're going to move right along here to Wisconsin Rapids. Marlene, you're on the air with Chuck Baldwin.
Thank you very much for taking my call.
Mm-hmm.
I am very thankful for this show. I am so thankful that my job allows me to hear this show. And the problem I'm having is I get to listen to this wonderful show and all these Christian shows, and I get to hear all these viewpoints, and I love it. And then I go to church on Sunday, and we start talking, and half these people work all day. They go home and plop themselves in front of CNN and Fox, and my view is totally different from theirs. I mean, we got people thinking Hillary Clinton would be a good choice for president, and they look at me like I'm off the wall.
Well, they need to
I wish they'd have shows like this on television.
Well, this airs at 8 o'clock at night, too. It re-airs, so you can at least remind them to listen with one ear.
That would be nice.
Thanks, Marlene. Keep the light shining there in Wisconsin Rapids. We're going to go to Maple, Wisconsin. We're talking to Michael. Michael, you're on the air. 800-733-9829.
Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah.
And thank you, Pastor Baldwin, for mentioning Ron Paul and your support of Ron Paul. I also support Ron Paul. I'm a sidewalk counselor in Duluth, Minnesota, and so the pro-life issue is very important to me, and I really appreciate Ron Paul's pro-life stance, delivering over 4,000 babies, and also being willing to secure the borders. And I would really encourage other Christians to check him out and go to ronpaul2008.com.
Thank you. Vic, if I may.
Sure.
You know, when it comes to the abortion issue, the Republicans have really, I think, done a number on we conservatives and those of us who call ourselves pro-life Christians by giving us the rhetoric that we want to hear on the campaign trail, but then after they're elected, doing very little of substance to change anything. Mm-hmm. Ron Paul, in 2005, introduced the Sanctity of Life bill, which, if that bill would have passed, listen to what it would have done. It would have declared every child in the womb a person. Mm. You see, we don't have that now. They are not considered a person in the womb. This bill would have recognized the personhood of every unborn child, giving them complete protection under the law from the moment of conception. It would have also taken out of the venue of the courts the subject of abortion, which means, in effect, that bill would have overturned Roe versus Wade.
Yeah.
Okay? Where was President George Bush on that bill? Where were all of these quote-unquote pro-life conservative Republicans on that bill? I went and looked at the bill when it came out. If I remember correctly, there was only like 4 or 5 co-sponsors in the House of Representatives for that bill. Now think about that. Now this is a bill that would have granted personhood to every unborn child. This is a bill that, had it passed and become law, would have overturned Roe versus Wade. All right? And they didn't support it. You didn't even hear anything about it. But Ron Paul, who is a medical doctor, an OB-GYN doctor who has delivered, as the caller said, over 4,000 babies, who understands the sacredness of life, introduced that bill, and it died because the leaders of the House of Representatives at that time, controlled by the Republican Party, would not support it. So we need people that are going to not just give us lip service, but are going to give us action on the issue of abortion, and Ron Paul would do it.
Michael in Maple, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, you live right there, Duluth. Isn't it in Duluth where right next door to the Christian radio station is Planned Parenthood?
Yes, that's right. I'm up there every week, every Thursday.
Do the folk at the radio station help speak out there to Planned Parenthood?
Well, they let us park in their parking lot, and they let us pray in one of their rooms.
Great. Well, we will pray that God will use you and give us wisdom in these days of decision. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the call from Michael. Let's go right now to Kenosha. We're talking with Gene. Gene, you're on the air with Chuck Baldwin.
Hello. I am a constitutionalist, and I also have read and appreciate most of the writings and through email that I get and read of Chuck Baldwin. And but I also am aware of the Libertarian Party and its stance on values. And as I've searched this, and I have libertarian friends because I'm for limited government and so forth, but also a Christian. But I've noticed that values rarely come up with libertarians. And I studied their website on the Libertarian Party, and I don't think it's changed, but they support legalized drugs, same-sex marriage, abortion light. It's despite what Chuck Baldwin said, it seems to me, by my research, that U.S. Representative Ron Paul actually wanted not to eliminate abortion by an amendment to the Constitution, but to go back to the states, which I am fond of that idea generally.
Okay, let's let Chuck respond.
Right. Well, you said at the beginning, you said that you're a constitutionalist, and so am I, and so is Ron Paul. And that's exactly would be his approach, and it's the right approach. And that would be to take it back to the states, which is exactly where it was before the Supreme Court ruled in Roe versus Wade in 1973. So that's the constitutional approach. But remember, as I just said, he also introduced the Sanctity of Human Life Bill, which would have eliminated Roe versus Wade legislatively. You see, under the Constitution, Article 3, Section 2, allows the Congress of the United States to exempt whatever it feels necessary from the domain and venue of the courts. And so if that bill would have passed, it would have taken abortion away from the venue of the courts and thereby killing Roe versus Wade. It would have been done legislatively, which is within the power of the Congress to do. Unfortunately, the Congress did not act. So we are opposed to Roe v. Wade. We're opposed to abortion, as is Ron Paul. But we also want to adhere to the Constitution, and we want to do everything that we do constitutionally, and that is what we expect our elected representatives to do. When every president, congressman, senator, doesn't matter, when they take the oath of office, they affirm an oath to support, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States, and we should want them and expect them to do just that.
We're going to be coming back in about 20 seconds to join with Chuck Baldwin in the last quarter hour here. We're also going to be going to Gene in Pensacola, Florida, who's standing by patiently on the line. Please stay with us. This is Crosstalk on the VCY America Network, and this information for stations who would like to carry the values voter debates coming up on Monday. Call our 800 number for more information. You're welcome to use the signal. We shall return. This is Crosstalk.
Here's Rick Grubbs with Redeeming the Time.
One of my favorite quotes about success is from E.M. Gray, who said, "The successful person has the habit of doing the things failures don't like to do. They don't like doing them either necessarily, but their disliking is subordinated to the strength of their purpose." I like that quote because it gets at the essence of why so many people never experience God's best for their lives. They're flimsy and short-sighted. They live for the moment, driven by appetites and following the path of least resistance. They will not force themselves to do the right thing when they don't feel like it. But in the long run, failing to subordinate those impulses and bring them under the control of God's Spirit leads to ruin. Remember that quote. The successful person has the habit of doing the things failures don't like to do. They don't like doing them either necessarily, but their disliking is subordinated to the strength of their purpose. Remember that, and you'll redeem the time.
Redeeming the Time from LifeChangingSeminars.com.
And coming down the home stretch here on Crosstalk with our guest, Chuck Baldwin, who who is with us from Pensacola, Florida. In fact, we're going to let Chuck talk with Gene, who is in Pensacola. This is kind of bouncing the signal a couple thousand miles there. Hi, Gene. You're on the air.
Good afternoon.
Yes, sir.
What is the subject of our discussion today?
Oh, you weren't listening.
Yes, I've listened since the beginning, but it's gone so far. I thought it was the Mexican corridor across the nation, and then it seems to be, what is it, Ron Paul or someone?
Well, we're also talking about the Mexican rigs rolling across America,
that's
the
what
NAFTA
I understood
issue.
At the outset it was,
sure.
And that's the purpose of my call.
It's more than welcome, sir. Go right ahead.
Back in the springtime, I had heard about this from some source. I don't remember when, but I called my congressman, Jeff Miller, the office, and spoke with them. They knew nothing about it, according to what they told me. We don't know anything about that. They were skeptical, like I was some crazy. And so I just let it go, and then I stumbled around on the Internet trying to find something, and I ran across plenty on the Internet and had all this printed out and read the material. I called the office back to tell them about it, and they still played dumb on it because I wanted them, Jeff, to know that I disapproved of this thing and try to do something to prevent it in Congress. Mm-hmm. But they just played dumb. They didn't know anything about it. And so I talked with several people about it, and then here of late I hear a little bit more drifting out into the mainstream of our society, a little bit more, and suddenly it seems like we have some concern, and I hope the whole nation gets stirred up about it, because they plan a home port, they call it a port, in Kansas City, and I thought a port was on the ocean, but containers coming in from the Far East, from China, they enter in southern Mexico, and remain unopened right on up to the middle of Kansas City, where there's supposed to be an area that's secured by the Mexican government before these containers are open, was the understanding that I had.
Your understanding is exactly right, Gene.
And also, these corridors, apparently several parallel corridors going from Mexico all the way to the Canadian border. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it seemed like there was about 12 of them. But our nation should be concerned about this. I think we're so focused on petty things between individuals that we're not looking at the larger issue. And I'm ashamed and embarrassed of the president that I voted for because of this. To me, I hear locally so much people calling for impeachment and all that, but I just say it's a traitorous act that would open this up. And this is several years back that the three presidents got together on our continent to make the preliminary agreement to this situation. But I call on every American, we better wake up, we better write our congressman, we better begin demanding something different than this, better than this. Stop this traitorous act.
Well, I thank you very much, Gene, for sharing that from Pensacola. God bless you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. We're going to go to Rockford, Illinois, talk to Gordon. Gordon, you're on the air.
Yes, I wasn't able to listen to the whole entire conversation because I was trying to get in on your line.
Okay.
So I've been dialing. I completely disagree with the gentleman. I didn't get his name. I was out shopping and got home.
Which gentleman, sir?
Early on in the talk, you've had probably several people speak.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
He was the person who endorsed Ron Paul.
Okay, that's our guest. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's your guest?
Chuck Baldwin. He was talking about Ron Paul in a favorable way. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But you're welcome to debate him. That's what the program is.
I disagree with Ron Paul's active, soft, pacifist way of governance. We have to be a strong government that will defend us against terrorism. That's the only way of getting the terrorists' attention. Teddy Roosevelt was a president who carried a big stick at a time when the United States of America was great. We were founded on Christian principles when our founding fathers came from Europe in order to have freedom of worship. And I believe that we should enjoy those rights of freedom of worship and stand up against the Islamic radicals, terrorists.
Chuck, you want to respond?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure why he feels that Dr. Paul would not want to protect and defend America from terrorists. He has never indicated any such sentiment as that. He has stated very plainly, very forcefully, that he believes in protecting America against terrorists. He did not support the war in Iraq, as I did not support the war in Iraq, and I don't today. But that does not say that we do not believe in protecting America and fighting terrorists. I wrote a column on this just recently, and if I really believe that if Congress would have accepted Ron Paul's solution back in 2001, right after America was attacked, that we could have stopped Osama bin Laden. In fact, I think we could have killed him. I think we could have taken out the vast majority of his al-Qaeda network, and we could have done it without being embroiled in a no-win war in Iraq, where our forces are really standing in between a civil war conflict that has been raging in that part of the world for centuries. His idea was to follow the Constitution and to declare a Mark and Reprisal Act, which is duly authorized in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, and allows the President of the United States to send our troops and even to fight along private sources if he seems necessary, to take out these potential individuals who are not a part of a government. The Osama bin Laden network, the al-Qaeda network, of course, are not a government. It's not a nation per se. These are terrorists. These are individuals working within countries. And so the Mark and Reprisal Act would have allowed the President to send necessary force against those people.
Chuck, we are out of time, and I hate to cut us off here, but the clock's going to do it if I don't.
Gotcha.
Chuck, I want to thank you for joining us today with some very vigorous discussion. Chuck Baldwin, pastor, columnist, and talk show host from Pensacola, Florida.
Thank you, Vic.
Thank you, sir, for joining us on Crosstalk. And, folks, thanks for joining us. Call your local station and ask them if they're going to be carrying the Values Voter debates out of Fort Lauderdale. It's on the satellite. It's free. Call us for more information, 800-729-9829.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the Internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a cassette or CD of today's program, send a donation of $5 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208. Or download by RSS or podcast when you visit crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.